Ever since people started lining racetracks with concrete walls, drivers were killed in crashes against them. From short tracks to professional circuits, the unforgiving surface claimed hundreds of lives. By the early 90s, the only softwall option was to line a track with styrofoam or tires. Tony George made developing softwalls a major priority for Indianapolis and the IRL. In 1998, they installed a device called the PEDS barrier to their inside walls. The wall absorbed energy, but came apart in a crash. Looking for a better system, George approached the University of Nebraska about developing something different. He funded the early engineering that created the safer barrier, and Indianapolis was the first track to install it in 2002.
The second crash appears just as destructive as the first. But computer readings from the car's crash recorders tell a different story. At the point of impact, the safer barrier begins to absorb the force of the crash. This force dissipates as the crash continues and protects the driver in the cockpit.
No driver has ever died after hitting a safer barrier. If anything good came out of the IndyCar split, it was this new push for driver safety. A major effect of the IndyCar split was the effect it had on the popularity of open-wheel racing. The split came at a time when NASCAR was exploding in popularity and IndyCar was destroying itself. At first, NASCAR's growth didn't come at IndyCar's expense. In July 1995, an ESPN poll showed that 30% of American auto racing fans said NASCAR was their favorite form of the sport. By contrast, 25% said IndyCar was their favorite. By March 1996, NASCAR had grown to 41%, while IndyCar shrunk only slightly to 23.8%. But by the late 90s, NASCAR's extreme growth left IndyCar far behind. Even in Indianapolis, NASCAR was more popular than IndyCars. By 2000, people were even more excited about NASCAR's Brickyard 400 than the Indy 500. It was reported that the cheapest seat for the Brickyard 400 cost $125, while a ticket to the Indy 500 cost only $75. In the 1970s, poll day qualifying for the Indy 500 drew over 200,000 fans in attendance. In 2000, an estimated 20,000 people came to Indy qualifying. In contrast, 50,000 people watched Brickyard 400 qualifying. After 1996, CART never again scheduled a race on the same day as the Indy 500. The Michigan 500 in late July was renamed the US 500. After 1999, the US 500 name was dropped completely from the schedule. At first, the IRL wanted to end their season every year at the Indy 500, but in October 1996, Tony George announced they would instead finish their championship in the fall, like every other series. It was said that sponsors didn't like their advertising budgets being spent over 2 calendar years for one IRL season. Safety in IndyCar in the late 90s was a major issue as well. 2 months after Scott Brayton's death at Indy, Jeff Krosnoff was killed in a kart race on the streets of Toronto. In 1997, the IRL moved to slower, non-turbocharged engines in spec cars, which dropped speeds and made racing safer. CART continued on their direction of supercars with big engines and massive speeds. In 1998, 3 fans were killed at the US 500 when a wheel flew into the grandstand. In 1999, 3 fans were killed at an IRL race in Charlotte by flying wheels. In the fall of 1999, CART lost 2 drivers in crashes, rookie Gonzalo Rodriguez and superstar Greg Moore. The IRL struggled to grow in its first few years. They suffered a major embarrassment at Texas in 1997 when a scoring error declared the wrong driver as the winner. For the first 2 years, USAC officials were in charge of scoring the races. The IRL ended this relationship in the aftermath. Their new, slower cars were no match for CART's exciting style of speed. The IRL struggled to convince fans that their drivers were as good as CART's. Even without the Indy 500, CART continued growing in several ways. In 1998, CART became a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. Their initial price was $16 per share. The price peaked at $35 in mid-1999. CART was able to raise $100 million through their stock offering, and the team owners made millions. It was even revealed in 2020 that CART made an offer to buy Formula One. But their money would soon fall apart. In 1999, it appeared CART and IRL were on the verge of reunification. NASCAR President Bill France Jr. was leading the peace talks between the two sides. Because France's company International Speedway Corporation owns several tracks, it would benefit him to have one strong IndyCar series selling out dates at his tracks. But in October, the Reunification deal fell through, and CART's stock price plummeted from $35 to $19 per share. This cost car owners millions of dollars. And Wall Street investors who were more concerned about CART as a way to make money rather than a quality form of racing played a big role in the quick collapse of the series. Roger Penske later said racers and stockholders had much different interests. For years, the IRL was viewed as a secondary series to CART. It was the new series that was said to be damaging IndyCar with their weak drivers and weak competition. If a driver did well in IRL, they might move up to CART. That was the case with Kenny Brack. In 1998, Brack won the IRL championship and went to CART in 2000, but by the end of the 90s, the new series had critical advantages. In 2000, the split turned in favor of the IRL. That year, Chip Ganassi Racing was the first major CART team to return to the Indy 500. Juan Pablo Montoya won the race easily. The next IRL race after the Indy 500 saw a thrilling fight for the win at Texas. Their level of competition was improving. The IRL attracted sponsors because it was an all-American series. While CART had international races, some sponsors would rather advertise solely in the US instead of sponsoring cars in countries where their product wasn't sold. The quality of racing was high with very close competition and excitement at the so-called cookie-cutter tracks. Texas Motor Speedway president Eddie Gossage called the IRL, quote, the best product on the racetrack today. The attendance was strong at those intermediate-sized ovals because of the practice of personal seat licenses, where tracks would require people to buy tickets for all their events. In order to get NASCAR tickets, you had to buy IRL tickets too. Tony George negotiated a great television deal that placed all IRL races either on ABC or ESPN. And through the TV deal and profits from races at Indianapolis, George was able to financially help IRL teams even in lean years. It was reported that George spent over $200 million to support the IRL when it was losing money. On the other hand, CART was in turmoil once again.
Democratic racing organizations have never done well over the long run.
In June 2000, Andrew Craig was forced out as CART president. His time leading the series saw mixed results. Before Craig's arrival, CART was making roughly $20 million in annual revenue and was barely profitable. By 1999, they made $75 million in revenue. But as the split continued to affect open-wheel racing, Craig couldn't correct its problems. Attendance and TV ratings started to decline around 1998. Tracks like Michigan, Nazareth, and Detroit couldn't attract the sellout crowds they once did. While support for CART dropped in the United States, Craig scheduled races in Europe, South America, and Japan. Team owners believed it was more important to increase shrinking support in the US before moving internationally. Some team owners thought Craig was aloof and alienated companies that did business with CART through a lack of communication and planning. As with any war, diplomacy was an important part of a president's role. Several meetings with Tony George to reunite IndyCar racing produced no compromise, which dropped CART's stock price once again. IRL driver Eddie Cheever even called Craig a, quote, secret weapon that helped the IRL by weakening CART. While Craig had his problems, no one better was found to replace him. Between June of 2000 and December 2001, CART had 4 different presidents. Over a few years, the IRL slowly improved its driver situation. After Tony Stewart left the series in 1998, Buddy Lazier filled his role as the star driver, a talented American who didn't bring much money and could win in any series. In 2001, Sam Hornish emerged as the next American superstar. While the IRL wanted to promote American drivers, Tony George also encouraged diversity in racing. The early years of the IRL saw the participation of female drivers like Lynn St. James and Sarah Fisher. Corey Witherell was the first full-blooded Native American to race at Indy. In 2002, George Mack became the second African-American driver to race at Indy. Meanwhile, CART lost their star drivers. Greg Moore died in 1999. At the end of 2000, Juan Pablo Montoya went to Formula One. And in 2001, Alex Zanardi suffered career-ending injuries. Other drivers switched to the IRL. 2001 was a make-or-break year for CART, and the series leadership made several mistakes that hurt them. In April, they were forced to cancel a race at Texas Motor Speedway 2 hours before the green flag. It was the first time coming to Texas, and they never scheduled a test session before the race. CART failed to realize that the cars were too fast for the track, and the G-forces were too much for drivers to handle. They canceled the race and looked foolish for their lack of preparation. In the summer of 2001, CART had a turbocharger controversy between Toyota and Honda. Honda developed a new part for their turbos that gave their engines more power. Toyota demanded CART make a rules change to level the competition. Both manufacturers were upset with the way CART handled the controversy. Both announced they would switch to the IRL in 2003.
The fact that over the last year or so, there's been a lot of changes in rules affecting engine manufacturers made with little regard to our time, our investment, and the amount of money, the people we have involved. It just, we felt that there's no respect for their partners in this business, and we just basically lost trust and confidence in them. So we don't need to work in an environment like that. It's just easier to go.
By the end of 2001, the lack of competent leadership made it obvious that CART would die within a few years. In 2001, Roger Penske returned to the Indy 500, and his teams finished first and second. At the end of the year, Penske left CART for good. A man who helped create the series and became its de facto leader abandoned what he started. It was reported that Marlboro wanted Team Penske to race exclusively in the US instead of CART's international schedule. In 2002, Chip Ganassi ran teams in IRL and CART before switching entirely to the IRL in 2003. Michael Andretti and Bobby Rahal soon joined him. In 2002, the CART IRL fight reignited with strong fury at the Indy 500. Helio Castroneves was leading the race with 2 laps to go and needed to save fuel. A fast-charging Paul Tracy caught Castroneves in Turn 3 and passed him for the lead. At the exact same moment, a crash in Turn 2 brought out the caution flag.
Yellow, 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 turn 2. Pits are closed, 3's the leader.
Oh, that is the race right there.
Yeah, baby!
He ran just a spurt of fuel, and Paul Tracy's gonna get it.
It was ruled that Castroneves was leader at the moment of caution, and Tracy finished second. The controversy was related to how drivers were told of the caution. All cars had a light in the cockpit that turned yellow at the moment of caution. People who supported Castroneves said he was leading when the moment this light on the dashboard came on. People in support of Tracy pointed to video evidence that showed Tracy was leading when the caution lights were turned on.
Now we move the image over to the right. And again, it's difficult to pick out, but there is a caution light there that has just switched on. You see it go from dark to a yellow shade. So at this point, the caution light is on. If you move the image back to the left, you make the call. It's your judgment as to where those 2 cars are.
There may have been an actual time difference between when the light on the dashboard came on and the lights on the fence. When was the exact moment of caution, when there were 2 different ways to relay the message to drivers? Paul Tracy was a CART driver racing for a CART team, whereas Castroneves was an IRL driver in an IRL team. Tracy's team filed an appeal to Tony George, and the process was expected to be highly political. They presented their evidence and waited for George to come to a conclusion. On July 3rd, he announced his decision. Castroneves was officially the winner. It was ruled that it never mattered when the caution light came on because the race director instantly declared Castroneves as the leader. The official's judgment call was not something that could be appealed. The IRL and CART were still as divided as ever.
Yellow, 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 turn 2. Pits are closed, 3's the leader.
The IRL was promoted as an intense series where drivers were always on the edge of danger. Like modern gladiators, their bravery was unmatched throughout all of auto racing.
Look at this, 3 abreast! No way! This isn't gonna work! Yes, it did! At the line! Oh, Harnish got him! Oh my gosh, what a finish! Unbelievable!
Oh, Castroneves! What a nice move that is!
And standing here, they come at about 220. Man, it'd take your breath.
Do you think we'd ever see you drive one of these cars?
Man, I wouldn't have an electric chair to drive one of these things. No way.
At Indianapolis for the 2002 U.S. Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher said he would never run an American open-wheel race, saying it's too dangerous and that he's not going to risk his life just for having a good time. That same weekend, Jacques Villeneuve criticized the IRL, saying that the close racing was manufactured and didn't take much skill to do. But that close racing was exactly what it was designed to be from the beginning. Close racing that would get viewers who didn't want to see a drawn-out, uneventful race.
You know what that is? That's the combined margin of finish in the last 3 IRL events here. Are you impressed? Heck yes! We are too. That's why we're here.
On June 8, 2002, Jeff Ward won an IRL race at Texas by 1 foot. The next day, Cristiano D'Amato won a kart race at Laguna Seca by 20 seconds. The heart-stopping oval racing excitement was a part of the IRL's growing success against CART, but not a sign that everything was great. The IRL went through several tracks where attendance was so poor the venues were quickly dropped from the schedule. Tracks like Las Vegas, Dover, New Hampshire, and Atlanta, all of them NASCAR fixtures, couldn't find an audience in open-wheel racing. At the same time, the majority of CART's road and street course races had sold out crowds. CART faced a major problem with television broadcasts. While the IRL had races on ABC and ESPN, CART couldn't find anyone who wanted to pay for the TV rights. Amazingly, CART had to pay CBS to broadcast some races and allowed Speed Channel to air other races for free. Their Long Beach Grand Prix was annually one of their biggest events, but in 2003 showed how badly the series had fallen. 95,000 people attended the race, while only 69,000 people watched it on TV. 2003 was the year the power shift was completed. Teams that once bashed the IRL gladly joined the new series. At the end of the year, CART went bankrupt. Shares in the stock were sold for 56 cents, and their remains were reorganized as Champ Car. If people thought the IRL was just a power grab for Tony George, they may have been right by 2003. The field was full of former CART teams, while the small original IRL teams were now gone. While the IRL was created as a series to help American drivers, it was filled with international drivers who quickly mastered the intricacies of ovals: Helio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, Scott Dixon, and Dan Weldon. But the IRL faced a new problem with rising danger. Originally designed as a safer series than CART, speeds in the IRL grew back to a mid-90s level. Dan Weldon, Helio Castroneves, and even 63-year-old Mario Andretti all suffered airborne crashes by the summer of 2003. Kenny Brack's crash at Texas in October subjected him to a force of 214 Gs, the highest recorded amount a human has ever survived. And finally, Tony Renna was killed in a violent crash in Indianapolis in testing. Once again, speeds were dropped. In 2005, the IRL found the national superstar that it was waiting for.
Speed queen Danica Patrick.
Dominated mostly by men. Danica Patrick is really a star.
Danica Patrick leading. She has the task.
A week ago, she sat on the front row and turned heads around the world.
Will she be the first woman to win the Indy 500?
She may be the new heartthrob.
A woman driver making racing history.
Danica Patrick finishes another race.
Win a pole, famous for a day. Win a race, famous for life.
As Patrick was a real contender for wins, the series continued to grow. Ratings for the Indy 500 in 2005 were up 59% over the year before, and their highest since 1996. At Texas 2 weeks later, Dan Weldon made headlines when he declared that the IRL was now a real competitor to NASCAR because of the drivers, the strong teams, and close racing.
You know what? It's a competitive series, best series in the world, so that's what happens when you have that.
But the IRL's momentum was short-lived. In 2006, Chevrolet and Toyota both pulled out of the series, leaving Honda as the only engine manufacturer. All but 2 races in 2006 were won by Roger Penske or Chip Ganassi cars. TV ratings and attendance continued to drop. As the renamed Champ Car tried to salvage what was once CART, Sebastian Bourdais dominated. He won 4 straight championships between 2004 and 2007. The only American success came in 2006 when A.J. Allmendinger won 5 races before quickly leaving for NASCAR at the end of the year. By the end of 2007, Champ Car was dead, and the scraps were absorbed by the IRL. IndyCar finally had one series.
Well, as the commander of hate in open-wheel racing, I hate the fact that the Indy 500 was screwed up 12 years ago. I hate the fact that Alex Zanardi and Greg Moore didn't get to run the Indy 500. I hate the fact that NASCAR's lapped it several times, but I love the fact that it's back together, and I don't care about the last 12 years because we've done all that muckraking and beating people up, and let's go forward and try and have some good racing because we finally got everybody together. We can identify this, and I think there's a lot of reasons to be positive.
In the summer of 2009, Tony George was removed as CEO of IndyCar by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Board of Directors. They believed he was spending too much money on track upgrades in the middle of a recession. The former CEO of Professional Bull Riders, Randy Bernard, was hired as CEO in early 2010. His time leading IndyCar produced mixed results. He oversaw the development of a new chassis for IndyCar, its first since 2003. He got Chevrolet and Lotus to re-enter as engine builders. He put a greater emphasis on the Road to Indy driver development program. But the biggest setback for IndyCar under his time had to be the disastrous Las Vegas season finale in 2011. Bernard created a promotion to prove IndyCar had the best drivers in the world by offering a $5 million bonus for any driver from another series that could win the Las Vegas race. After attracting big attention for the series, no driver took the challenge.
We have the fastest, most versatile race car drivers in the world, and no one chose to make that decision to go forward with it. We had 24 inquiries about the opportunity. We had 6 sign up with applications. And we had many others call and inquire about it.
To salvage the promotion, unemployed Indy 500 winner Dan Weldon took the challenge.
I just want to thank Randy for the opportunity, but also thank Randy for what he's done for the IndyCar series to date. I think, he always talks about moving the needle, and I think with the momentum that the IndyCar series has gained this year, I think he's truly achieved just that, and for him, Vegas would certainly be the icing on the cake.
After a star-studded build-up, IndyCar's race at Las Vegas was a disaster. Race officials allowed 34 cars to start the race, the largest IndyCar field since 1997. It quickly became apparent that the cars couldn't get away from each other. On lap 11, James Hinchcliffe and Wade Cunningham made contact and started a massive crash. IndyCar's $5 million man, Dan Weldon, died in the accident. The crash damaged IndyCar's perception of a series of close oval races. While pack racing had been done for years in the IRL, drivers feared ever returning to that style. Randy Bernard received death threats in the aftermath of Weldon's crash. By 2012, Bernard was the victim of another rebellion from team owners. The new chassis for IndyCar was more expensive than expected. TV ratings were dropping. A canceled race in China hurt teams' budgets. Bernard signed an agreement with German tire manufacturer Continental to replace Firestone in 2015. In a 2021 interview, he revealed the large money Continental offered.
First of all, IndyCar, over 15 straight years, and this is public, it written in the paper, they had lost $30 million a year for 15 straight years. So my job was to come in and try to stop the bleeding, which I did. I made it break even in 3 years. And then I had a major sponsor. I had Continental Tire that was willing to come in and pay $36 million as a sponsor. And Firestone was paying $500,000, and they were giving some endorsements, and they were giving some tires and stuff like that. So it was more than that. But
Firestone tires performed well and never failed. The switch to another company was something team owners were uncomfortable with, no matter how much money was offered. That was the final straw, and Bernard was released. After Bernard's firing, Tony George resurfaced and attempted to personally buy IndyCar from Holman & Company, the parent company that owned IndyCar. The bid was turned down, and he was named to the board of directors of Holman & Company again in 2013. In 2016, he became chairman of the board again. Finally, in 2019, IndyCar began a new chapter in its history. Tony George led the sale of both IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to Roger Penske. 25 years after the split, IndyCar was a mixture of CART and IRL ideas. The 2021 schedule had even less oval tracks than CART did in the 90s, only 3. Since the split began, there are 49 tracks that have been dropped from the IndyCar schedule, as the series looked for venues that attracted crowds. The cars are a spec chassis, with sealed engine leases to keep costs down. But perhaps the biggest change is now the cars have covered cockpits. Between that and the safer barriers, driver safety is far greater than it's ever been. IndyCar is unified again, but the question remains, will the popularity ever return?